So today is our 12th anniversary. So today we brought the kids to Cape May to go on a Cape May carriage ride. So over here is our horse that we are going to ride around Cape May with this horse in this wagon. This horse is named Ice, and our lovely tour guides who are going to tell us the amazing, fascinating facts about Cape May. Ready, kids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you ready, Nady? Are you ready? Here we are at the carriage tours.
Hi everybody, welcome to Cape May.
Cape May. Here we are at the Cape May carriage tours.
Okay, can everybody back there hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, not too loud, not too soft?
Not too soft.
All right, because I have a loud voice, I could probably just yell at you.
They're used to it.
Kids, sit down. All right. So, have you guys been to Cape May before?
Yeah.
We have.
We've been to the zoo.
You've been to the zoo? Have you been to the city here before?
Not a lot.
Not a lot?
Yeah, we walked over.
We walked in here.
Have you done the carriage tour before?
No. This is the first
Well, welcome.
time.
Thank you for riding with us today. You want to hear a little bit of history of Cape May?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, we can start with, my name is Lynn. I'm training with Mario. This is my boss.
Hi, Mario.
Make sure you say good things about me at the end.
Okay.
I'll tip you handsomely.
Ooh.
The horsepower today is provided by Ice. He is a Percheron and Standardbred cross.
So his name is Ice?
Ice baby.
Too cold. Too cold.
So the first person that stumbled upon Cape May was Captain Henry Hudson in 1609. He was looking for a northwest passage to China. Obviously he did not find it here, so he continued on his merry way. The next person that came along was Captain Cornelius Jacobson May, which thus is Cape May. And he was looking for a place for the Dutch to settle and make their fortune in the New World. When he got here, he discovered the temperate climate and that there was a lot of whales off the coast. So they decided to establish a whaling and fishing village here. It was said back in the day there were so many whales that if you put them end to end, you could walk across their backs to Delaware.
Wow.
However, the English got word of what the Dutch were doing here in Cape May and decided they wanted a piece of the action. So they moved in, and within 100 years, the whale population had almost been decimated. We do have whale watching tours here in Cape May, and you can see whales this time of year, but most of the time you'll see them in the fall. The population is slowly recovering.
I feel like we are going back to our friends.
Look at the beautiful
So
houses.
if you check out this church to the left of us, if you look at the stained glass windows, which you'll be able to see better once you get around the corner, you'll notice that there's no faces on the people on the stained glass windows. The reason for that is that the stained glass faces are painted on the inside of the windows so that when the church is lit up at night, you can see the faces glowing from the light. Now, we did have a couple of devastating fires here in Cape May. One was in 1869. One was in 1878. 1878 was in the beginning of November. It started in an abandoned hotel. Shortly after the proprietor had left to go back home to Philadelphia, it spread to 35 acres, destroyed 35 acres worth of prime beachfront property. It basically went from Jackson all the way down. It stopped at Gurney, which we'll go in Gurney so you'll see how far that is. A lot of old historic hotels were destroyed, a lot of homes. Prior to the fire, mostly what was built here was large hotels. A few homes, but there was a lot of large hotels along the beachfront. After the 1878 fire, that was in the height of the Victorian period. So the reason why we have so many Victorian homes here is because of the fire. Mostly what was rebuilt after the fire was Victorian, was in the Victorian style. We have approximately 600 Victorian buildings in this town. We're second in Victorian buildings only to San Francisco. So that's a lot of Victorian buildings in a small area.
Wow.
If you look to your left, this is the Queen Victoria Hotel.
Wow.
Clearly that's very Victorian style. It actually takes 90 cans of paint to paint the Queen Victoria.
Wow.
It has to be done at least every 3 years because of the salt air around here. The Sherwin-Williams Company was so impressed with the Queen Victoria that they offered to donate 90 cans of paint, which runs approximately $30,000, by the way.
Goodness.
They offered to donate the 90 cans of paint in exchange for allowing them to use the Queen Victoria on their brochures.
Wow.
This here is on the left is the first pharmacy here in Cape May. On the second floor was an illegal gambling establishment because gambling was not legal then. And on the third floor was an area where the gentlemen could retire and be entertained by painted ladies of a different sort than our lovely Victorian homes. As we go along Columbia Street, you'll see that these homes are all lined up in a row. This was once beachfront property, and the homes were all built next to each other so that no one was blocking the ocean view from their neighbor. This street was also a very heavy gambling street. There was a lot of gambling establishments on this street. If you look at this blue house to your left, you can see the clubs engraved into the cornices there, and if you look way at the top by the roof line, you'll see some spades. That was the gambling establishment's way of saying that we're open for business for gambling. You would think the police would have caught on to it, but I guess they didn't. This to the right is the Abbey. This is a Gothic Revival style home. You can tell because of the pointed arched doors and windows. You can see the scarlet etched ruby glass over the door there. Oh, we're having a wedding. The tower is 60 feet tall, and if you stand on the top of it, on a clear day, it said you can see Delaware. These 8 cottages here are called the Stockton Cottages. They were built by the West Jersey Railroad in an attempt to encourage people to rent homes at the shore and ride their railroad to the shore. Back in the day, you could rent those cottages for $3,000 for the entire summer, and it came with a cook, a housekeeper, and a maid. I would definitely take that deal. Back in the Victorian day, I'm sure you're aware the ladies wore a lot of clothing, high-necked blouses, hats, petticoats, corsets, gloves, all of it, even in the summertime. So you can imagine how hot that would have been. When they went to the beach, they wore woolen, full-length bathing suits, like literally suits, which was not only itchy, but also very heavy, and there was a lot of issues with the ladies drowning. So they eventually put in some piers out into the ocean and tied some ropes to it, and the ladies would hold on to the ropes when they went in to swim, and if they became distressed, they could just pull themselves back in on the ropes rather than all that attire dragging them down. The ladies and the men were also not allowed to bathe on the beach at the same time. So they put out flags denoting when the women could swim versus when the men could swim. And a lot of the young ladies would not fake, but emphasize the distress they were in so that the young men standing on the boardwalk could run down to the beach and save them. As we approach the corner here, you'll see a yellow building on your left, kind of cat-a-corner to us with all those pillars. That's now the mainstay at Inn. It's a bed and breakfast. But back in the day, it was called the Jackson Club, or the Jackson Clubhouse. That was an elite gambling establishment. And if you notice the floor-to-ceiling windows and that there's no railings on the porch, the reason for that is that if the police came to raid the building, the gentleman could jump out of the window and off the porch, and as long as you weren't touching the building, you were deemed to be not involved in the illegal gambling. This home here on the left was the ladies' tea room. The ladies would sit on that porch right there and watch their husbands across the street gambling their fortunes away. So the word is that the ladies of the tea room were often the ones calling for the police raids on the Jackson's Clubhouse. As we turn the corner here onto Howard Street, you can see this light blue and white building over here. Even though this was a gambling row, so to speak, that was a ladies' finishing school. That's where they learned to, all of their manners, their etiquette, how to snag a rich husband. Back in the Victorian times, being a gold digger apparently was not a bad thing. On the left is the Chalfont Hotel. This was built by our own Civil War hero, Colonel Henry Sawyer. A story about Henry Sawyer was that he was captured by the South during the Civil War and imprisoned, and he was deemed to be up for execution. When his wife got word of this, she decided that was not going to happen to her husband. So she petitioned President Lincoln on his behalf. President Lincoln told the South that if they executed Henry Sawyer, then Lincoln would execute Robert E. Lee's son, who he had in captivity at the time. So needless to say, Henry Sawyer was scared, an exchange was made, and Colonel Sawyer came home and built below the Chalfont. The Chalfont features the Magnolia Room on the first floor. It is a famous Southern-style restaurant. It's been featured in food magazines and food television shows. They're very famous for their Southern fried chicken. If you look on the second story and you see the double balcony there, that's called a courting balcony. Young men and young ladies were not allowed to sleep in the same room. So when they retired at night, the lady would go to her room, he would go to his room, he would step out on the balcony, she would lean out the window, they would say their good nights, and then they would retire to their separate rooms. This building here with the green shutters is where the Sawyer family lived while they built the Chalfont, eventually turned into servants' quarters. That building back there with the tin roof is also servants' quarters. It had no heat or electricity or air conditioning, so you can imagine, because servants were, needed that. So you can imagine how hot that building got in the summertime. This little building that you can just see the roof over the hedge is the bathhouse. In Victorian times, they didn't bathe very often, maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And water had to be preserved. So the family would bathe in all the same bath water. The father would start first, then the mother, then the children, so that by the time the baby got bathed, the bath water was pretty dirty and you couldn't really see the baby in the bath water. Hence the saying, don't throw the baby out with the bath water. To your right is the Dormer House. This was built by John Jacoby. He was a marble merchant in Philadelphia. You can just see between those parked cars the original marble hitching posts. There are, the house is called the Dormer House because there are 11 dormers on the roof. That's because Mr. Jacoby had 11 daughters, and he promised each one that they would have their own private bedroom and their own private window. So he put in the 11 dormers so there would be no squabbling over who got the windows. I guess Mr. Jacoby finally, after 11 daughters, gave up on having a solo.
By the Butterfly Cottage.
So we're now entering Frog Hollow area of the historical district, and the reason it's called Frog Hollow is it is the lowest point in Cape May. When they filled it in to build these homes, all the frogs started jumping out of the marsh, and thus it got the name Frog Hollow. This stretch of street here used to flood quite frequently, hence you can see the houses are all built up off the ground. They finally figured out that the ocean water was coming in through the sewers, so they eventually installed some back valves. The ocean can flow out, but it can't flow back in. Unfortunately, this area has not flooded in quite a number of years. This house coming up on the left, you'll see the railings there with the tulips. That is a his and her staircase. Back in the day, you weren't allowed to see a lady's ankles, so they would put those staircases in so that the lady could go up one side, the gentleman could go up the other, and there would be no fear of the gentleman getting a peek at the lady's ankles. If gentlemen were caught peeking at ladies' ankles, they were fined $5 a day. Considering that the average person's wages amounted to about $100 a year, $5 a day is quite a bit. As we come down Jefferson Street, you'll see here on the right this greenish and yellow building. That was the barn for the horses. When people came down from Philadelphia, they would board their horse here in the barn. And the next building up, the brown building, which is now a photography studio, would be the carriage house and the apartments for the driver, the grooms, whoever would stay there. You could get a room and a meal for the day for 25 cents. Again, if your entire income per year is $100, that's still a pretty hefty sum for a room and a meal. This home coming up here on the right is a newer home. It's not Victorian, but it was built to blend in with the Victorian style. They do, however, have a very Victorian-type garden. It's an award-winning garden. Back in the Victorian days, if you had grass, you were considered low class because it meant you couldn't afford a gardener.
Grass in the yard, does that mean Victorian days that you don't have a gardener?
Correct. Because if you had lots of plants and flowers and things, you know, the lady of the house often didn't do a whole lot of work, so you would have to have a gardener to keep things trimmed and weeded. And, you know, imagine trying to do all that in your long gown and your petticoat and your corset. So this building on the left is the Southern Mansion. It was built by a wealthy businessman from Philadelphia.
They gotta fix that pothole.
His family summered here for 80 years in the Southern Mansion, 80 plus years. When the last relative passed away, the house was sold at auction for $6,000, and it was turned into a boarding house. It was painted completely white. The interior was cut up into numerous small rooms, and over the years that it was a boarding house, you can imagine the clientele was not as high, shall we say, high class as the Allen family. And the proprietors didn't realize the amount that it would cost to upkeep that large building. So it became quite derelict over the years, and eventually they lost their license for a boarding house and it had to be auctioned off again. The current owner's father purchased it at auction for $600,000, and he gifted this lovely home to his daughter along with $1 million to renovate it for her wedding. I know I didn't get that type of wedding present. I sure would have liked to have been in that family. When they were renovating the Southern Mansion, they found the plans for that extension that you see there. So the city was able to approve them to build that extension, and which added 10 additional guest suites and some space for weddings and so on and so forth. Because it was the original plans from George Allen. When you do any sort of renovations here in Cape May, particularly if you have a Victorian historical home, you have to follow a lot of guidelines from the Historical Society. You can't use vinyl siding, you have to re-side with wood, etc. Original roofing, that type of thing. Now, as we turn the corner, you'll see our fire museum. You can see the firehouse beyond is being rebuilt. Inside the fire museum is a 1928 fire engine that still operates, that is open to the public. I'm not sure if you have to have an appointment. If the doors are open, I believe you can go in. This church here, you'll notice the vertical siding. A lot of the homes before the 1878 fire had that type of siding. Unfortunately, after the fire, when the Victorian homes were rebuilt, they then switched to the horizontal wooden siding. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but Cape May is actually 60 miles below the Mason-Dixon line. So we're actually considered to be part of the South, but we did fight for the Union in the Civil War. Didn't believe in slavery around here in Cape May. This home here was actually part of the Underground Railroad. When you see that gourd-shaped light there by the door, if that light was lit, that meant that they were open and ready to receive people running from the South. Now, if we come down Hughes Street, you'll see that the Victorian homes are painted with very vibrant colors. In Victorian times, that's how you showed off your wealth, because in order to make deep, rich colors, it cost much more money than to make white or just plain cedar shakes. So the more colors you had on your home and the more vibrant they were, the more wealthy you were considered. This yellow home on our left was built by Norman Rockwell's brother. The Rockwell family spent a lot of time here, and that was their home when they came to visit. This building, large building on the left, was originally the Baltimore Hotel. It then became a home for girls, but they don't live there. It's just for girls, underprivileged girls to come on vacation. If you see these additions, you see that addition on the second floor there, and I think there's another house up here that has one. That was the first indoor bathroom. They would jut out like that so that you could use the bathroom and everything would just fall down, and that would be the greenest spot on their lawn. Before we had indoor plumbing. White house here with the light blue shutters. This is the Cherry House. It's built in the Federal Colonial style. This is what many of the houses with style would have been prior to the 1878 fire. Do you see that oval plaque with the tree on it in between the two floors there? That was an indication that you had purchased fire insurance. If you didn't have fire insurance back in the day, the fire company was not obligated to put out your fire. They would come out, but they would hose down, you couldn't prove you had fire insurance. They would hose down your neighbor's property so your fire didn't spread, but they would do nothing to stop the fire at your house. That was called insurance back in Victorian times. Today we call it extortion. Now you can see another view of the back of the mainstay as we come along.
I'm getting sick. I'm getting tissue out. No, I'm getting sick. Tissue out. What's the tissue out? What's the tissue out? What's the tissue out, Mom?
Here comes another horsey, that's why.
Okay, so as we come along Columbia Street here, you can get a better opportunity to look at the gingerbread on these homes and how they indicated that whether they were a gambling hall or not. This White House up here, you can see clubs on the upper railing. They kind of look like little crosses. And in the upper corners, you'll see dots. That signified the dots on the dice. This gingerbread is a very interesting story. We call it gingerbread today. Back in the day, it was called carpenter's lace. The reason for that was because each lady had her own pattern of lace and or crochet that she would make her window treatments and her tablecloths out of. And the husbands would give those patterns to the carpenter. The carpenter would reproduce them into gingerbread. And each lady had her own separate pattern on her home. This house here with the deep plum color, that would be considered a very wealthy home. It's got 3 different colors. In order to be considered a painted lady, you have to have 3 colors on your home. Side of the street here, these lovely gas lanterns. They run 24 hours a day on our natural gas supply. They used to be run by oil, and the city would employ some young lads to go around and light those every night. Nobody really wants to do that job these days, so we converted them to gas, and they run 24/7.
Yeah, I saw that in a movie called Mary Poppins.
Oh yes, you would. On your left is the Cape May Inn. The Captain May Inn. It's named after Captain May, although he never stayed there. It actually was originally a doctor's office. The doctor had one rule. You went in one door, the front door, you went out the rear door. That's because medical knowledge back in the day wasn't that sophisticated as it is today, and oftentimes the doctor didn't want to see the new patients seeing what his old patients looked like going out the back door. This building here on the left, with the bars on the windows top and bottom, was a bank, the New Jersey Trust and Loan Company, I believe it was called. It's stenciled on the front of the building. It's now the Winterwood Christmas shop. The vault is still in the basement because the building was actually built around the vault, so it can't be removed. Now, as we approach the carriage stop, do you all have any questions for me? Can anybody take a guess how much ice weighs?
Wow.
90 pounds?
Anybody else?
Oh no, not 90. 1,000,000 grams.
Oh, don't give me grams. It's got to be pounds.
How about
2,000.
2,000?
Does everybody agree?
I think it's 2,500.
You guys are very good judges of horse flesh. Ice weighs around 2,000 pounds.
Way to
You
go.
actually pull 3 times his weight, so no matter how heavy of a lunch you all had, I think we're safe.
Way to go, Ellie. Good guesser. This family loves horses.
Ah, that's a good thing. Keeps kids out of trouble. Oh, no ice. All right, please be careful stepping down.
Okay, so we can go on another one. Let's do it.
Oh,
Mommy,
let's walk this way.
I want to
That was great. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Enjoy your rest of
That
your
was
stay.
fascinating. Very interesting.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you, Ice. Thank you. That was wonderful. You did great. You did wonderful. You were awesome. Have a great day today. Thanks.
That was fabulous. Very interesting.
What'd you think?
It was awesome.
Ellie, what did you think?
It was great.
Zeke?
I'm taking a picture with my camera.
Zeke, what did you think?
It was great. I really loved
Let me see the picture.
Oh.
Ooh. Ice.